Hey Leggari Nation! Today we're showing you these beautiful custom-built countertops and how we coated them using our epoxy. Check out how this kitchen looked before installing our epoxy countertop kit, and then after. We'll be showing you the whole process of how we got this look. Our kits have a lifetime warranty and can go right over your existing surfaces. Creating a new look in your kitchen has never been easier. Check the description below for more info and a link to our website where you can purchase your kit today.
Okay guys, so we're ready to start priming, but I'm gonna go over everything that was done to these counters up to this point. Obviously, you saw us build them. We built them out of pine plywood, some high-end plywood, 2 3/4-inch sheets, glued, screwed together, and then we did the self-edge MDF trim. It's already been primed, and it's nice because they're already rounded edges, so we didn't have to router those. That's why we like to use those. Plus, it puts our seam on the top versus the seam on the face, where the 2 sheets went together. Easier to fill, easier to sand, and then Bondo. So we bonded all the seams, all the nail holes from nailing the trim face on, all the screw holes on the top. Any seams were filled, sanded, and then we also caulked this back edge gap. So the whole back edge of the counters, you know, there's usually a gap there. We did a paintable latex caulking on that. As long as it's paintable, our primers will bond to that. And then obviously we cut the sink out, and then they wanted to do a bigger sink than the actual cabinet, so we cut out the actual cabinet, braced it up, and so now they have a really big sink in this kitchen, which is really nice because it is a kind of a smaller kitchen, so they have a massive sink in there. And then obviously plastic, so we got thick plastic on the floor, painter's plastic on the cabinets, and this thing's pretty much ready to go. So we're gonna mix up the primer, put the primer on, and then start coating this kitchen. We're gonna be doing a countertop kit primer. And if you guys are mixing our floor kit primers, you're gonna wanna use a paddle wheel mixer and a drill. This is just a smaller amount, so we're just gonna mix it with a paint stick. But what we wanna do is we wanna dump the part A into the cup, and then I'm gonna pour the part B, and then I'm gonna add 2 ounces of water into the part B container, shake that up, and then pour that in. We always add 10% of water to our primers. And before you guys use these, make sure you shake them up as well before you dump them out. For applying it, 3/8 snap roller. Make sure you de-shed it, run it on some painter's tape. That'll get any loose hairs, any fibers off of that. And this is our white primer. The part B is the pigmented part. And then we'll add the B. So like I said, guys, we're gonna add 2 ounces of water into the part B because it's the pigmented part. It's a lot thicker. And then we'll shake this up. And then we wanna mix this for about 2 minutes, scraping the sides, scraping the bottom, making sure we get all those edges scraped off and blended in. Mix for 2 minutes, and then this is ready to go. Now this isn't gonna heat up in a bucket, in a container, like epoxy is, even though it's epoxy based. We can use this for the next 1 to 2 hours, right? The biggest thing is if you don't cover it with plastic, it'll get a crust over the top. You don't want that to happen if you're trying to wait or something. Just put plastic over it and that'll keep it fresh for an hour or so. But yeah, we wanna make sure when you're doing the lighter colors like white, we hit our edges 2 times, because we want our faces and edges to be perfectly white. We don't want to see through the countertop anywhere on our faces, edges, or the top corner. But these primers are amazing. They cover very good, and they also are fast cure, so it's gonna dry extremely fast. We'll be able to coat epoxy over the primer within probably 45 minutes to an hour, and if we put a fan and get some airflow on the primer, it'll dry even faster. So once we prime, you wanna make sure you're putting epoxy over the primer within a 2-hour window. You don't wanna wait longer than that because the primer will become like a high gloss epoxy sealed surface, and nothing's gonna wanna really stick to that. So we wanna make sure if you guys are priming, you're putting epoxy over it within that 1 to 2 hour window. And I like to do epoxy over it when it's still tacky, within about 45 minutes to an hour. You should be good. But just keep in mind, if you're gonna prime, make sure you can epoxy over that within 2 hours. I'm just gonna dump a bead out the middle. And when you're starting out, the roller's gonna soak up a lot of that primer, as you can see. So we'll just get this kind of soaked up. All right, once I get the top done, then I hit my faces. Like I said, we'll do 2 coats on any edges that don't look perfectly white. All right, so we got a coat on everything. Now I'm gonna go around and just hit these faces again, because if you look, you can kind of see where all the Bondo patches were. There's one. Kind of see all those darker spots. I'm not worried about the top because the top's gonna be on so thick. I just want my top corners, my faces, to be as bright white as I can get them, and 2 coats will do that. So I'm gonna use a roller tray, obviously, to get product on my roller. And then we're just gonna hit these one more time. And we didn't wait. Once we were done doing that first coat, we just came back and hitting these edges again. All right, guys, so I'm gonna finish doing 2 coats on this, and then we're gonna throw some airflow on this, and that's gonna speed up the dry time. I mean, it's already drying out, and it's only been down for maybe 10, 15 minutes, so we'll finish this up, and then we'll go into taping our edges to create the dam for the epoxy pour. We got our Leggari squeegees. We're gonna use these to blend the epoxy around to create a cool effect, but I wanna cut it down. So we made these really long so we can use them for a lot of different applications for like countertops, obviously floors, but I'm gonna cut it at an angle so the squeegee can still be used on a pole for like a short squeegee, and then I'll trim it back up once I cut it off, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. And we have the plastic cover on it that'll help hold this squeegee part in place as we cut it. Now you can get pretty precise here and measure. I'm not gonna measure, we're just gonna whack it off. That's simple. Not too shabby for not measuring, huh? So now this can be a short guy, still go on a pole to get into tight areas. And we also have the cover to keep that squeegee from bending. And then what I'll do now is, you can use them like this obviously, but I'm gonna just cut this at an angle. All right, now we got a little squeegee for counters. All right, so what we need to do now that the primer's dry, it's tacky, we need to tape our edges. We like to use yellow painter's tape, masking tape. It sticks the best. We're gonna do 2 layers of tape, and we're basically gonna tape half onto the face and half is gonna be sticking up. Alex is gonna show you how it's done right now. So we do 2 strips. So he did the first one, I came through with the second one, and I'm trying to get to the same height as the first one. If it's off a little, that doesn't matter. Next thing you want to do is press this down really good everywhere, corners, and I always pinch my corners in. It tightens it up a little. Put your finger in there, just pinch that up. But again, the biggest thing is making sure you got a nice tight seal everywhere. So what we're gonna be using on this kitchen is stuff from our single item store, Leggari.com. You can buy single items, gallon and a half kits of epoxy, metallics, colors, all kinds of different things, singly, not in countertop kits. So what we have is a gallon and a half. I think this is clear. So yeah, this is our clear metallic epoxy, gallon and a half. And then we have a gallon and a half of our pigmented white. And we're gonna be using our universal pigments. For the clear, we have our dolphin gray and our ash gray, and then obviously our pigmented white. And again, you can get all this stuff from the store under single items at Leggari.com. And since we're doing kind of a stone kit process, taping the edges, we're gonna be doing 8 ounces per square foot. Typically you do 4 ounces on our standard kits, but we're gonna do it a lot thicker. You get a lot more depth, a lot more modeling. The counters flow over the edges better. They coat the edges thicker. There's a lot of benefits of pouring your counters thicker, and the designs you get are a lot different from a standard kit where you're using half the material. So for 50 square feet, you need 3 gallons of epoxy, and he has about 45 square feet here, so we're right there. So we're gonna use 3 gallons. Like I said, gallon and a half of clear for our universal pigments, and then gallon and a half of pigmented white. Now mixing the epoxy is very simple. I'm gonna show you guys how to mix it thoroughly, fast, and efficient without having to worry about any soft spots. We can scrape all the bucket out, we can use all the product and not have to worry about unmixed resin in our bucket. So we're gonna pour the part A in first. Now we're gonna do the same thing with the pigmented white. All right guys, so mixing the correct way, we call it 3P2. It involves a secondary mixing container, and this will eliminate any soft spots, any resin that's not thoroughly mixed. It's fast, it's efficient, and you'll never have an issue with resin getting hard. Because what happens is, you saw we pour the part A in first, so all these sides are covered in part A. We add the part B, and unless you're scraping your sides, getting all that part A off the sides, blended in with the part B, when you dump this out, you might have some of that unmixed resin dump on your counter or on your project, and that's gonna leave a soft, sticky spot that's probably not gonna set up. So to eliminate that, we came up with 3P2. We go up and down in the bucket 3 times, and then we pour, so that P stands for pour, into a secondary container, and we go up and down 2 more times. Now when I'm going up and down, we start from the top, we go down slow. Once we hit the bottom, we go around a couple times, come back up slow. Once we hit the top, we go around a couple times. That's basically 1. So we're gonna do that 3 times, pour, and then up and down 2 more times. So that basically takes out all the guesswork of mixing. And you notice I'm using a smaller paddle wheel just because it's only 1.5 gallons. If you're doing like a 3-gallon kit, use the bigger paddle wheels. And I'm not worried about inducing air into our resin because it's formulated to allow the bubbles to self-release and pop. So huge benefit of our resin, among a lot of other things. Once you guys are mixed your resin, you wanna make sure you dump it out right away. It will set up and heat up in a container, especially in a mass like this. So make sure everything's ready to go, mix it up, go get it dumped out on your counter. Once it's dumped out and leveled out, you got plenty of working time with it, anywhere from 45 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on how long it took you to mix it and stuff like that. So we'll get this dumped out and ready to go. All right, so before we pour, we're gonna map out kind of how we want the vein pattern, the design to go, just using a simple pencil. He's gonna map out the design that he wants. That way when we're pouring out the product, we can kind of follow that line. We're gonna be making 2 different colors. So I need 3 quarts of the clear for each color. Theoretically, I could leave the remainder in a 5-gallon bucket, but I want them all in the same container, so I know when one's ready to go, they're all ready to go. They're all the same amount. And then obviously pouring out like they're gonna be easier to pour out of and manage out of some smaller containers instead of a 5-gallon bucket. All right, so now we got them in smaller containers. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pigment these 2 clears with our universal pigment. That way just everything's ready to go. That way when it's time to dump out, we're ready to rock. I only need about half of this pigment. It's 5% of pigment. So whatever amount of resin you're making, you need about 5% of pigment to tint it. Now, rule of thumb, obviously go lighter colors first. I wasn't even thinking about it. That way we don't have to clean off the paddle wheel, but since we're doing kind of a stone kit process pour, doesn't really matter if we get a little bit of this color in here. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to keep your paddle wheels clean. That way you don't have to worry about chunks of epoxy flying off or have to buy new ones. Denatured alcohol in a bucket with a lid so it doesn't evaporate. We're just gonna spin this forward and reverse a couple times. And we've done this quite a few times. That's why it's all nasty in there. We can reuse it multiple times. All I have to do is wipe it off, clean the shaft, and we have a perfectly clean paddle wheel. So what I'm gonna do is pour a bead gray. We're gonna split it off, and then we're gonna add white right in the middle. All right, so it's good when you guys are dumping out to make sure you're getting color everywhere, right? We don't want to pour too much of one color out, and then when we get to a different spot in the counter, we don't have any more of that color. So you can kind of see we've kind of evened all the color out. So now these bigger spots that are opened up, see how all this product's touching and leveled out? I don't want to push it away. When I'm blending it, I want to kind of bring some of this product to fill in these spots. So taking our squeegee and just kind of following that pattern that we have laid out, because again, we want to get everything kind of coated. And that's why we do it thick, guys. See how it just levels itself out, and you get these really cool effects just from these universal pigments. We haven't even sprayed this thing yet, and this thing is looking awesome. What we're gonna do now is go around, and you can kind of see we have some spots that we're just gonna fill in any spots that are missing resin. So once you're done with that, everything's kind of filled in. We're gonna spritz isopropyl alcohol, small to medium drops, and that's gonna create a bunch of cells. just by barely pulling the trigger. It's gonna give it that really cool natural stone look. So you guys see all the cool fracture veins, right? This stuff you'll see in natural stone. We got all this cells, just really, really exotic looking, very cool. Okay, so we spray the isopropyl. Last thing, we're gonna let this evaporate for about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna mist the surface with denatured alcohol. That's gonna make the surface layout glass smooth, and then we'll probably wait anywhere from half an hour to an hour to pull the tape and let the edges get coated. All right guys, so I'm gonna show you how to test for pulling tape. So we fold the tape back. You see how it's just barely moving? There it goes, it's starting to run. So that's when you wanna pull your tape. If it's running really quick, it's too early. If you pull it too early, a lot of your design is gonna start to run. We want the top to look just like this, and that's why we do this process. That's why we came up with this process of taping your edges off, letting the resin set up, and then pulling your tape when it starts to get thick. That way you don't lose a bunch of resin, and also it doesn't mess up your design on the top. So that's the easiest way. Now if you have a thicker edge you're coating, you probably want to pull it a little bit sooner. It's better to pull a tad sooner than late, because if you wait too long, it's not going to flow down your edge. If that happens, you can take a heat gun. You can kind of heat up the resin on your edge to get it to kind of flow down the face. But we're going to pull the tape right now. And you'll notice it's not pulling any of the primer off of our edge. The biggest trick to not having any primer pull is making sure after you prep your faces, you clean them extremely well. 2-3 times, make sure those faces are cleaned extremely well, and you won't have any primer pull off your face. So what we do now is I'm just gonna come through and slick this whole face off. Don't worry about messing up the design, it's still gonna flow over. We just have to get rid of all the surface tension, these dry spots. We wanna get them coated with epoxy. We'll let that side drip a little more. We went and grabbed a bite to eat, came back. You never want to assume your edges are gonna be good right when you're done, right? So we came back, it's been about a half hour, 40 minutes. And like we have a spot here that we wanna add some product to. I can see the primer. Okay, there's one spot. And then we have a spot over here on this edge also where I can see the primer. Now, sometimes you'll get spots in your edges that kind of didn't flow over evenly. We can brush those in, address them. But if you walk away and assume your edges are gonna look good, you're not able to fix it. So I always like to come back, check, hang around, check, make sure the edges are dialed in before we actually leave the project. So I'm gonna add some product to these edges, and it's just as simple as getting some that's dripped off, and we're just gonna run it on there. We obviously wanna get some of the same color that was there. And then we're just gonna get a little on top so it can kind of slowly flow over. And then once you're happy with your edges, your faces, we're just gonna scrape the drips. So I like to use a putty knife, something that's flat, skinny, right? So we're almost cutting it off. You can do paint sticks when it's kind of really fluid, but when it starts to get sticky, I always like to scrape it with a putty knife. It'll keep it from building back up on your countertop, and it'll kind of just shave it right off. And this will probably have to be hit again, just because it is still kind of flowing over. We'll clean this guy off, a little denatured alcohol on a rag. We'll be able to scrape it again. So as long as we do that, we won't have to sand any of the drips, the edges, but we'll probably have to scrape those drips again in another half an hour or so. To about that time this thing will be set up. So that's pretty much it for the applying the epoxy. Tomorrow we'll show up and we'll show you how to do the matte urethane. We're gonna be doing a matte top coat on this. It's gonna look really, really good.
Are you looking to remodel your kitchen without breaking the bank? Do you love the look of high-end stone or granite, but just can't stomach the price? Well, look no further than Leggari's Epoxy Countertop Kits. As the inventors of the first DIY epoxy countertop kit, our kits have quickly become the industry standard for beautiful, high-end epoxy countertops. In fact, Leggari countertop kits have been installed by thousands of DIYers and homeowners just like you all around the world. But don't take our word for it. Check out the hundreds of 5-star reviews from satisfied customers. Or order a sample kit today so you can try before you buy. Don't you think it's time for you to head over to Leggari.com to see just how easy it is to turn your dream kitchen into a reality?